Bones Malone and the Spooky Boys.
Am I coming in? Am I coming?
Am I coming in now? Ah, there we are. I knew I just needed to reroute the Gordon amplifier through the Hawkman relay. Now, good morning, and a wonderful All Saints Day to you, the dear listeners of the Illustration Deer College Guerrilla Radio Station. Coming to you all throughout 3 Portlands on all airwaves, including one wavelength that mankind was not meant to know of. I told you I'd get that set up for you, Glorth and Axel. With the dawning of November, we bid farewell to that wild cat and crew, Bones Malone and the Spooky Boys. As is tradition, I'll be spending this morning recounting the major exploits of Mr. Malone and his crew. Most of these are retellings of my own reports, but I am in possession of the works of a couple more unsavory journalists that plague the Odyssey's office. No, I am not plagiarizing, folks. These articles apparently disappeared from the desks of their respective authors. I would give them credit where credit is due, but it appears neither of them bothered to put their names on the paperwork. But, without further preamble or ramble, let us recount the mischief and mayhem as one of the most notorious paracrime outfits gave our city the annual shakedown. October 1st. Well, folks, here we are once more in 3 Portlands during a gorgeous October, and that means Bones Malone and the Spooky Boys are at it again. Reports are coming in that the first victim of Malone's terrorizing is none other than our beloved Tim Wilson, of Wilson's Wildlife Solutions. It seems the gang descended upon his sanctuary and caused quite a ruckus, as Mr. Malone was giving the gentle Mr. Wilson quite the squeeze. In the words of Mr. Wilson, they gave us all quite a fright. You would think we'd be used to Mr. Malone by now, but things are always in uproar when that trio shows up. You should have seen how upset the animals were at all that rattling. October 4th. Update 2 on Bones and his boys, listeners. It seems this was another year when Bones and his lads shuffled their way down to Deer College student housing for some ghostly delights at our own haunted house. They came bearing gifts, just like in previous years when they'd stopped by one of those reanimated raves we're always graced with during this most sacred of months. Of course, Bones was sure to bring some of the finest, certainly stolen, dwarven ale and she wine his stock has to offer. The trio proceeded to party all night with our living, incapacitated peers, and any living party animal daring enough to join in the shindig. On a related note, 8 dorm spaces in Cannon House and 27 in Mad Sky are now available for any looking for campus housing. October 10th. It's been nearly a week since we've heard from the illustrious Bones Malone, or at least anything more than some mild mischief around town. But once more, the Spooky Boys are rattling on some doors. This time they kick down the entrance of Anderson Robotics, Tommy Guns Bore, and demanding to speak to Mr. Dorans, the sitting head of the company. Mr. Dorans, being the reasonable and logical man he is, simply buzzed them right in. Only Mr. Dorans would truly be able to articulate what happened next. We all know the annual hooliganism that Mr. Malone brings, so, of course, I had no fear of them and simply decided to get it all over with. At least then my lobby wouldn't be so full of holes from gunfire and me needing to hire someone new to clerk the front desk. To my surprise, however, the trio set up a presentation that was quite insightful, if a bit antiquated in method, on the problems with the skeletal structure of the new line of robotic humanoids we had been working on. I had no idea how they knew of the design, honestly, but I have decided to pardon them and all involved due to their constructive feedback leading to a 34% reduction in the time scale to full production. October 14th. This morning a mild ruckus at the town's art district proved to be another of Mr. Malone's wild escapades. What terrible deeds did the trio get up to in our quaint little Bohemia? A short interview with Miss Daly of You Paint It, We Frame It found that things took quite the artistic turn. In the words of Miss Daly, Mr. Malone and his 2 friends spooked me quite a bit when they walked into my humble store, but they quickly proved to be a perfect gentleman. Mr. Malone told me, "Me and my boys here need a new portrait of our poker room. The current one's got too many bullet holes in it. We already got the picture, and I hears you's the best framer in town. So you got yourself a commission?" I do hope I did Mr. Malone's words justice. He's got such a lovely speaking voice, you know? At any rate, they handed me the painting and told me I had a week, or they would set up their own frame job. I'm not quite sure what that means, but they paid in advance and they were very generous. October 15th. In what appears to be an artistic spree, that excellent little jazz cafe in downtown, Three Bohemians, has been the next target of Bones Malone. The trio caused quite the stir as they burst into the cafe, instrument cases in their hands that surely held the signature Tommy guns the trio's known for. But things took quite a lyrical turn as the trio made their way to the stage, opened their cases, and proceeded to set up for a performance. Those cases were of quite some interest, as one of them contained an entire drum set, and the other a full double bass. Mr. Malone's case made more sense as he pulled out a simple trumpet. The news of Mr. Malone and the spooky boys preparing to perform spread like fire around the areas surrounding. Within minutes the cafe was packed tighter than William Howard Taft's coffin. But don't worry, my dear listeners, you can be sure your host was in attendance as those bone daddies blew us all away. After a bit of tuning up, Mr. Malone stepped forward to the microphone, tipped his hat and said, "This one's for Louis," and the trio started their set with a stunning rendition of La Vie en Rose. Then they set all our bones shivering as the trio covered some of the best jazz hits of the last century. Of course, it's always a sight to behold a skeleton playing a trumpet when they lack lungs and lips, but Mr. Malone is undoubtedly not one to let little things such as organs or a mouth get in his way. October 18th. It seems, after setting fire to the musical senses of patrons at the Bebop last Sunday, Mr. Malone and his boys were found to literally set fire to a small warehouse on the fringes of town. Witnesses state that Mr. Malone was heard shouting, "Yous mugs think you're living up Richie D's legacy? Y'all making me laugh from my head to the tibia of my toes." The trio then opened fire on the open main bay door of the building without any further preamble, and, shortly after, began using the crates of bottles as Molotov cocktails to begin their fire that would ravage the structure. They were quickly met with another unidentified trio who returned fire on Mr. Malone and his boys as they made their way to a small vehicle and swiftly fled the scene. UIU agents and the fire brigade thaumaturgists arrived at the scene just as the last bits of gunfire were exchanged before Mr. Malone and his duo and the unknown triplets beat a hasty retreat. Due to having to deal with the raging fire, the two groups were able to quickly escape outside the agents' reach. Once the fire wizards made short work of the infernos, the UIU entered the building and found that the place was being used as a storehouse for numerous illegal anomalous items. Particularly noted was a large amount of various liquors stashed in the crates. While the identities of the trio who operated the warehouse remain officially unknown, second-hand accounts report one of the agents shouting, "Fucking tell me that ain't Murakami behind the wheel." Those familiar with current paracrime events will certainly make the connection to Murakami Killswitch, known for being the wheelman for the Chicago Spectre. October 21st. The gloves seem to be coming off those bony fingers of Mr. Malone, as his gang continues the violence from the 18th, but with a very different target. We all know Mr. Marshall, Carter, and Dark operate illegal auctions within the town. It's part of the charm here, but they rarely cause a stir amongst the residents. This tepid peace was shattered in the late hours of the evening when Mr. Malone and his duo reared their heads again to raid an ongoing auction. The incursion started when a human skull had come up for bidding. It appeared to be completely normal before witnesses stated it had roared to life and shouted, "I am a powerful demonic force. I am the harbinger of your doom, and the forces of darkness will applaud me as I stride through the gates of hell carrying your head on a pike." In order to retain civility, the staff gagged the amusing post-dead fellow. It appears bidding had just begun at $25 when gunfire was heard from the lobby. The door to the hall quickly burst open, and the infamous trio muscled their way inside. Mr. Malone was reported to be silent as a tomb as he stared directly at the auctioneer. The entire time he stalked up the aisles to the stage, all while those thugs were at his side to quell those in attendance by brandishing their weapons. Once they'd reached the lectern, Mr. Malone exchanged a few short sentences with the auctioneer and then gunned the man down without another word. After readjusting his tie, Mr. Malone was said to then retrieve the skull, remove the gag, and lead the rest back out through the front entrance. October 24th. ICSUT today was not greeted with the festivities by Mr. Malone and his gang. One more reason why Deer rules. Once they'd gotten to campus, they were found to be questioning anyone they had came across regarding the whereabouts of Dr. Maria, the college's head of necromancy. Once they finally learned his location, teaching a lecture on preserving the flesh of zombie at the time, the trio made their way to the lecture hall and stormed in. When he was questioned, Dr. Moria confirmed his identity, at which time Malone's sidekicks seized the professor and hauled him over to stand before Mr. Malone. However, Malone was noted to look around the lecture hall and state, "He's not here, boys. These kids don't need to see what happens when you commit crimes against the Bones Battalion." Mr. Malone then led the group out of the lecture hall and down to Dr. Moria's office. No gunfire was heard, but the unmistakable voice of Dr. Moria was heard loudly ringing out in agony through the halls before quickly cutting out. Why was Dr. Moria targeted by the gangsters and forcibly retired to his office? Rumors of the ICSUT administration using reanimated skeletons against their will to reshelve their library books have been flying for a while now, and it seems there may be some truth to them. So, it would seem, our rival campus certainly walks in locksteps with their masters at the Occult Coalition, if they so freely practice post-death slavery. After engaging in a short retreating gunfire with the ICSUT campus security, the trio was seen quickly fleeing from the scene. It should be noted that, although gunfire was exchanged, the only victim of the gang today was Dr. Moria. As a result of this incident, the UIU is opening a full investigation into the matter of illegal necromantic practices on the part of Dr. Moria and the ICSUT administration. Unfortunately, the prime suspect, Dr. Moria himself, was found in his office shortly after the scene was secured, deceased, and missing his entire skeleton. October 31st. Now, we know the last few significant exploits of the nefarious Bones Malone and the Spooky Boys have seen extreme violence and death. So what could they possibly have planned for Halloween Day? As you all are getting your finest costumes on and, for you rascals after my own heart, already pre-gaming for this evening's festivals, have a little listen to what our X-Files gang, the Unusual Incidents Unit, was met with once their lunches had settled. In the late afternoon, the commotion outside the UIU main office was hard to miss. The gangster ghouls marched their way up to the front door, rushed into the bustling office, and were greeted with every handgun the UIU had available. So, about 7 guns. And what did Malone and the boys do in response? What weapons were they holding? Bags of candy. And they went around the office handing out candy bars to every agent, full size. Bless those bones. After the excitement of their entrance, the building calmed down in the face of this Halloween treat. Before they left the building, Captain Daniels, and the current head of the 3 Portland's office, was given one last treat to pass on to a specific superior. This hard-working reporter was lucky enough to arrive on scene just as Mr. Malone reeled back his right arm and slugged the captain right across the cheek, sending the man sprawling to the floor. As the trio ventured back into the city, Mr. Malone glanced over his shoulder and simply said, "Make sure you passed on the sugar to old Herbie, you hear? And tell him Happy Halloween from Bonesy." I decided to do this video just to get into the Halloween spirit. I know it is only the 23rd of September, but Why can't we start the festivities now, right? Have a good night. Sleep well. Dream of me.